I'm Iris Caldwell, 67, and I don't scare easy. Tonight, I was eating pot roast at my son Miles's place when my phone lit up. My house cleaner whispered that a moving truck was in my driveway and a woman with keys had just opened my front door. My fork hit the plate so hard the room went silent. I knew exactly who thought she could walk through my life like it belonged to her. Jenna Morrison. My daughter, 35. Entitled enough to call theft a misunderstanding. I kept my voice steady and told my cleaner to step outside and wait where the cameras could see her. Then I dialed 911 and reported an active burglary at my address. Miles was already on his feet. Yav said, car keys in hand. As we sped toward my house, my doorbell camera pinged my phone again. The live feed showed a man I recognized, Caleb Morrison, Jenna's husband, carrying a box marked Ava's room straight through my foyer. Behind him, the truck crew lifted my grandmother's rocker like it was theirs. We turned onto my quiet, oak-lined street and saw the battered truck squatting in my circular drive as if it had paid the mortgage. Headlights washed over my front porch, where the steel deadbolt I paid to install gleamed like a dare. You might think calling the police on your own child is flatly unforgivable. Wait, this wasn't chaos. It was a meticulous blueprint. Miles gripped the steering wheel, hard enough to make the leather creak as we sped through the narrow streets. The police dispatch had confirmed 2 officers already on site, assessing what they called a possible domestic misunderstanding. I stared out the windshield, watching the red and blue lights flicker against the trees like judgment. A misunderstanding was generous. This was a calculated invasion with a spare key. When we turned the corner, my stomach tightened. The moving truck sat parked bold as brass, its back doors yawning open to reveal my own furniture. My china hutch, the oil painting of my late husband, and the mahogany desk I'd refinished by hand, all stacked like a yard sale. 2 officers stood on my porch, taking notes as Jenna gestured with the confidence of someone who believed she could talk her way through anything. I stepped out before the car even stopped moving. My heels clicked against the driveway as I held up my house keys and my driver's license. The quiet authority of ownership. Miles followed with his phone, recording everything, capturing every frame of the officers, the truck, and Jenna's startled expression when she finally saw me. The air between us felt electric. A storm gathering under the porch light. Officer Ramirez glanced between us, uncertain who truly belonged there. Jenna smiled sweetly and told them her mother had given permission to move shared family property. I opened the folder. I always carried property deed, insurance inventory, and time-stamped photos of every room. As Ramirez flipped through the pages, I said calmly, "If she has keys, they're copies. My locks were last changed in May." The officer's brows lifted. He knew what that meant. This wasn't confusion, it was premeditation. Miles stepped forward, calm and deliberate, his briefcase already in hand. He had the kind of stillness that unnerved people who were lying. Officer Ramirez looked relieved to see paperwork. Cops love documentation more than drama. Miles flipped open the file, revealing printouts and receipts he'd compiled over the last few weeks when we first suspected Jenna was planning something. He laid out the proof on the hood of the patrol car like evidence in a courtroom. Rental agreements signed by Jenna Morrison for the moving truck. Timestamps showing pickup at 3:15 p.m. that afternoon. An electronic receipt from the same account she used to pay her cell phone bill. Then came the email confirmation from a storage facility under her name, reserved for temporary personal items. Officer Lee photographed every page, his expression hardening with each shot. Jenna's tone cracked for the first time. She told the officers that we'd misunderstood, that these were shared family assets, not stolen goods. Miles didn't even flinch. He simply produced the digital inventory list from my insurance company. Ach item had serial numbers, appraisals, and updated photos showing they were mine alone. The officers exchanged looks the kind that meant the conversation had shifted from polite questioning to probable cause. When Caleb appeared in the doorway carrying a box labeled Noah's room, he froze at the sight of the paperwork spread out under flashing lights. His shoulders slumped, and the color drained from his face. Jenna hissed his name under her breath. But the damage was done. Even from the porch, I could feel the panic rolling off her like heat from pavement. Inside, I caught a glimpse of Ava and Noah peeking from behind the staircase, clutching stuffed toys and looking terrified. That was the hardest part, seeing innocence caught in the crossfire. I steadied myself. This wasn't about punishing my daughter. It was about proving that decency still had teeth. Jenna regrouped fast, the way she always did when cornered. Her voice turned soft and wounded. The tone that used to fool teachers and boyfriends alike. She told Officer Ramirez that her mother had been forgetful lately, that I'd agreed she could move in but probably didn't remember. It was a masterclass in manipulation, painting herself as the dutiful daughter and me as a confused old woman. Officer Ramirez's brow furrowed, caught between courtesy and suspicion. She asked if there was any medical documentation supporting what Jenna was implying. Miles didn't let the pause stretch long. He pulled out the folder again, this time showing the legal paperwork we'd filed 6 months earlier. The denial of guardianship petition, the blocked medical evaluation, every signature notarized and dated. I added calmly that I'd worked full-time until last year, handled my own taxes, and passed a recent driver's test with a perfect score. Ramirez nodded slowly, her gaze shifting back to Jenna. The act was crumbling, but Jenna wasn't done performing. She clasped her hands, sighed dramatically, and said she just wanted to keep her mother safe. The words tasted like poison in the cool night air. Then I did something she didn't expect. I told the officers that if she and Caleb were taken in, I wanted emergency custody of Ava and Noah. The statement landed like a hammer. Jenna's face snapped toward me in disbelief. For the first time, she realized this wasn't a scolding, it was a reckoning. Behind her, the children's frightened faces blurred through the glass, and I knew I couldn't flinch. This was the moment our roles reversed completely. The daughter who once thought she could declare her mother incompetent had just proven her own instability. I didn't raise my voice or shed a tear. I simply stood my ground, the way truth does when lies run out of air. By sunrise, I was sitting in the county courthouse lobby with a cup of vending machine coffee and Miles beside me. The officers had processed Jenna and Caleb overnight, holding them on burglary and conspiracy charges. I'd barely slept, but exhaustion sharpened rather than dulled me. I was already drafting my petition for temporary custody of Ava and Noah before the courthouse even opened. Camille Park from Family Services arrived with her clipboard, brisk and kind in equal measure. She walked through my house within the hour, checking the bedrooms, inspecting the fridge, noting the safety locks on cabinets. Miles had already rearranged the guest rooms, stocked groceries, and printed the children's school schedules. Camille nodded, saying my home met every requirement for immediate placement. It was the first relief I'd felt in months. The emergency hearing moved fast. Judge Klein, efficient and no nonsense, reviewed the police report, the custody request, and the existing protective orders between me and Jenna. Jenna's attorney argued she'd acted out of desperation, not malice. But the judge wasn't swayed by sentiment. The paper trail was too clear, and the children needed stability now, not later. When he granted me temporary custody, the words felt heavier than any gavel strike I'd ever heard. Ava and Noah would live under my roof until further order of the court. Jenna's face hardened across the aisle. her eyes burning with disbelief and fear. For the first time, she understood I wasn't the frail woman she'd tried to exploit. I was the one who would raise her children and rebuild what she'd nearly destroyed. Walking out of the courtroom, Miles whispered, "You really did it." I didn't answer. Justice wasn't done yet. This was only the first line of defense in a war Jenna had started herself. Miles and I spent the next week tracing Jenna's digital footprints. He sat at my kitchen table surrounded by laptops and spreadsheets, his calm precision cutting through my rising anger. What he uncovered made the burglary look like the tip of an iceberg. Jenna had been siphoning information from my online banking for months, setting up email forwards and accessing my accounts from Caleb's old work laptop. The discovery turned my stomach. I'd believed the worst thing she'd done was try to steal my furniture. But this was premeditated, financial abuse. The kind that strips a person's dignity before it takes their money. Miles printed the access logs showing unauthorized logins tied to their apartment's IP address. When we presented them to the fraud department, the bank's compliance officer immediately escalated the case. Detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit met with us 2 days later. They confirmed multiple attempts to move small transfers, never enough to flag alerts. But steady, calculated withdrawals, adding up over time. I listened in silence as they explained how the couple had used my name to test credit limits and open inquiries with predatory lenders. Each word felt like another nail sealing Jenna's credibility shut. Miles, methodical as ever, labeled every file and built a timeline that would hold up in court. When I went to bed that night, the house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was hollow. Jenna hadn't stolen out of hunger or panic. She'd stolen because she thought she could get away with it. Still, I knew exposing the money trail mattered more than my pain. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes, it clicked download and printed receipts. The first morning, Ava and Noah woke up in my house. The air felt different, quiet but uncertain. They sat at the kitchen table, their cereal bowls untouched, their eyes fixed on me like I held all the answers. I'd rehearsed the conversation in my head all night, but nothing could prepare me for the weight of their small, hopeful faces. I poured milk, bought myself time, and decided honesty would have to be my compass. Ava was the first to speak, her voice thin but steady. She asked why her mother had taken my things. Her question, slicing through the silence like glass breaking. I took a slow breath and told her that sometimes grown-ups make bad choices when they're scared. Jenna was scared about losing her home, I said. But instead of asking for help, she took something that didn't belong to her. Noah looked up from his toast, frowning. He said it was like when Ava took his Pokemon cards and pretended she didn't. His innocence made me smile despite the ache in my chest. Yes, I told him. But what your mom did was much bigger, and grown-ups know better. They both nodded, and I could see understanding flicker in Ava's eyes. Too old for her age. When they finished breakfast, I packed their lunches and kissed their foreheads. Watching them walk down the driveway to the waiting car, I felt the strange mix of grief and gratitude that comes from surviving your own child's betrayal. I couldn't change what Jenna had done, but I could make sure her children learned what she hadn't, how to tell the truth before it destroys everything you love. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. All polished wood and quiet tension. Jenna sat beside her attorney, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the table as if refusing to see me. Caleb, on the other hand, looked hollowed out, the kind of man who'd already surrendered. When the prosecutor announced that he'd accepted a plea deal in exchange for testifying, the last thread between them snapped clean. Caleb spoke in a flat voice, outlining every step of the plan. How Jenna rented the truck, how he copied my house keys, how they staged the move under the pretense of family help. His words hit her like open-handed slaps, each detail exposing a new layer of deceit. I watched the confidence drain from her face, replaced by a quiet panic she could no longer disguise. Her attorney tried to soften the damage by claiming desperation, not greed, had driven her actions. But the jury's faces told another story: disbelief, then quiet disgust. When the judge asked if she had anything to add, Jenna whispered that she'd been under pressure, a phrase that sounded as empty as the life she'd tried to steal. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The truth was finally doing its job, clean and merciless, breaking the alliance that had nearly broken our fall. When Judge Klein delivered the verdict, the room went still enough to hear the hum of the ceiling vent. Jenna Morrison was found guilty on all major counts: breaking and entering, theft, conspiracy, and attempted financial exploitation of an elder. The sentence: 4 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 2, and full restitution for the property she'd stolen. Caleb received probation, his cooperation sparing him from a cell but not from shame. Jenna didn't look at me when the bailiff took her away. She stared straight ahead, jaw trembling. That her pride, the last thing holding her upright. Watching her go, I felt something colder than triumph: clarity. She had crossed a line, and the law had finally caught up. Miles squeezed my hand, whispering that it was over. But as I looked at Ava and Noah waiting outside the courtroom, I knew the truth. Justice might have been served, but peace was still a long way off. What I'd won today wasn't revenge, it was responsibility. 18 months later, Jenna requested her first supervised visit. When she walked into the family center, she looked smaller, somehow steady but humbled. Ava stood close to me, Noah hiding half behind her, both unsure whether to smile or retreat. I let them decide, watching as Jenna knelt, her voice soft and clear. She wasn't coming home yet, but she was trying to be someone they could trust again. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a beginning. The headlines came fast and merciless: grandmother jails, her own daughter for greed. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, shouting questions about guilt, family, and forgiveness. I hired a small PR firm to protect the children's privacy, to make sure their names stayed off every screen. Ava and Noah didn't need the world turning their pain into a spectacle. Miles handled the statements with surgical calm, framing everything around one word: accountability. He reminded the press that boundaries aren't cruelty, they're protection. Gradually, the noise faded, replaced by quiet respect from people who understood how love can look harsh when it refuses to be blind. At home, life found its rhythm again. Piano lessons, little league practice, dinners at 6 sharp. The house felt lighter, grounded in routine rather than crisis. Sometimes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window and barely recognized the woman staring back, a survivor who had learned that strength isn't loud, it's consistent. When Jenna and I finally sat down alone, there was no courtroom, no audience, just the hum of the clock between us. She looked older, softer around the edges, her hands trembling as she folded them in her lap. She told me about a woman she'd met in prison who lost her father before she could apologize. Watching that woman fall apart, she said, that was the moment she realized she'd been living the same story in slow motion. I listened quietly, letting her words settle. Regret is cheap until it costs something, and Jenna had paid dearly. When she said she wanted to change, I didn't rush to comfort her. I told her that forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting that she couldn't rewrite what she'd done, only outlive it. She nodded, eyes bright with tears, and whispered that she understood. For the first time, I believed her not because she said the right thing, but because she stopped defending the wrong ones. Truth doesn't need applause. It just needs to stop hiding. 2 years after the trial, life found its strange new order. Jenna had completed her rehabilitation program and was working at a nonprofit that helped women re-enter society after incarceration. She lived in a small apartment with a responsible roommate, checking in weekly with her counselor and following every condition of parole. She no longer asked to come home. Instead, she earned her place in the children's lives, visit by visit. Caleb kept his distance. Still on probation and paying restitution through court-ordered deductions, the children saw him only during supervised sessions, which suited everyone just fine. Miles had taken on the role of quiet protector, managing the family's finances with the same precision he once used to build legal defenses. His wife had recently given birth to their first child, expanding our circle in the most unexpected, gentle way. Ava and Noah thrived under stability. They studied hard, laughed easily, and carried themselves with the quiet resilience of kids who had seen the world at its ugliest and chosen to stay kind. Every so often, I caught Ava watching Jenna during visits not with fear, but with measured curiosity, as though studying a woman rebuilding her own blueprint. That look gave me hope. Now, at 71, my home hums with laughter instead of chaos. On Sundays, the family gathers for dinner, Miles with his baby, Jenna bringing homemade sandwiches, the children chasing the dog through the yard. As I watch them, I understand that survival isn't the same as healing, but it's where healing begins. Some families have to fall apart completely before they can become whole. I didn't just protect my house, I rebuilt my lineage. And in that quiet victory, I finally became the woman my daughter once tried to destroy, unshakable and free. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it struck a chord or reminded you of your own battles, share your thoughts. Below your voice matters here. Don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories of justice, strength, and redemption. Until next time, take care of your peace.